Ladies and gentlemen, we continue our work at Ukraine Crisis Media Center and now give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, with weekly updates from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. Mr. Hook, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. As we look back on the year about to end, it is hard not to feel a mix of regret and hope. Familiar patterns of violence re-emerged this year, with periods of relative calm quickly followed by steady increases in the level of violence. We are in fact currently witnessing such a pattern, a downward spiral of violence that last week resulted in over 16,000 ceasefire violations recorded by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, a 40% increase on the previous week. This week, especially on Monday and Tuesday, the violence has continued unabated. Between 4 p.m. on Monday and 4 p.m. on Tuesday this week, the SMM recorded over 7,000 ceasefire violations, with violence engulfing in particular western Luhansk region and Yasinovata. The use of indiscriminate multiple launch rocket systems in the Novoluhansk and Sverdlovsk areas has also been noted this week. In what is supposed to be a ceasefire regime, one that the sides say they respect, this year the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has recorded almost 400,000 ceasefire violations. This fact alone is an indictment in itself. It should serve in the coming year to spur the sides towards real and full implementation of the ceasefire they agreed to over 3 years ago. Almost 400,000 ceasefire violations in 2017 is a fact that the sides must give careful consideration. In a year in which the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission counted almost 4,000 instances of proscribed weapons in violation of agreed withdrawal lines, the sides must also consider and reflect on the root causes of all these violations to the ceasefire. The weapons withdrawal provisions of the Minsk agreements were not inserted and agreed to by the sides for no reason. Everyone sitting at the table in Minsk in September 2014 clearly understood that if weapons remained in place, they would be used. And that, as our ceasefire violation figures demonstrate, has been proven beyond all doubt. Similarly, the sides' agreement, signed on the dotted line, to demine and disengage forces and formations, or at the minimum to maintain positions, was well understood by all as essential components in a ceasefire arrangement. The signatories of the Minsk agreements understood that all of these components, weapons withdrawal, disengagement and demining, were required if normalization in eastern Ukraine were to happen. Looking back on 2017, it is clear that the sides have not only failed to fully comply with their commitments, but have seemingly forgotten the meaning of these commitments. Those commitments, let us not forget, mean, if fully implemented, a sustainable ceasefire and the basis for a lasting peace. Dear friends, a new year is almost upon us. It is, for many of us, a time for renewal. We expect, as has been the practice in the previous years, that a recent recommitment to the ceasefire will result at midnight tonight in a period of relative calm a respite for the hard-pressed, long-suffering people living along the contact line. I hope that those who make decisions, that those who decide the fate of hundreds of thousands of people will take this opportunity, this momentary calm, to reflect on the future, taking into account the events of the past 3.5 years. The weapons have not been removed. The mines are still in the ground. Military forces and formations are very close to one another, sometimes just 100 meters apart, and sometimes, as we have observed recently, even moving closer. And the conflict goes on, threatening to become protracted if it hasn't already become so. There is clearly an urgency to end this conflict, but there is seemingly no sense of urgency on the part of the sides to do so. This must change in 2018. Decision makers must realize that the longer this conflict goes on, the more difficult it will be to stop it. This is, after all, the very nature of a protracted conflict. As decision makers reflect over the New Year period, I hope they realize the urgency of ceasing fire, withdrawing weapons, disengaging forces and formations, and demining. There is no more time to waste. Dear friends, I would like to take this opportunity to reflect also on the victims of the conflict. This year, so far, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has confirmed the death of 85 people and the injury of 384. Among them was a colleague of ours, Joseph Stone, killed by what probably was an anti-tank mine near Priship on 23rd of April. Joseph is missed and mourned by his family, friends and colleagues, just as the 84 other fatalities this conflict has claimed this year. Dear friends, as well as reflection, this is also a time of renewal. While the conflict raged in 2017, we also during the year saw indications that it is possible to end it. We saw a willingness and an ability to cease fire. With coordination from the Joint Center for Control and Coordination and facilitation and monitoring by the OSCE Special Monitoring Missions, the sides did in fact, in specific areas, temporarily adhere to the ceasefire on hundreds of occasions this year. Many critically important repairs to infrastructure, facilities providing water, gas, electricity would not have happened otherwise. The long-awaited and much-needed repair work to the wooden ramps at Stanica Luhanska Bridge was also conducted because the sides temporarily adhered to the ceasefire. Small steps, I admit, but steps in the right direction. Steps that show that there is a willingness and ability to make things better, to improve the lives of the civilian population. Steps that demonstrate that the renewal is possible, that a fresh start can be made, and that 3.5 years of violence can be put behind us. Steps that ultimately show that a sustainable ceasefire in 2018 is possible. It is possible that the people of eastern Ukraine have a happy and peaceful new year. And it is this, a happy and peaceful new year, that I, on behalf of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, sincerely wish to all people of Ukraine. Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask them.
Dear Mr. Hook, Georgi Tikhi, ARD. The question is about the prisoners exchange, which was looking like it's going to happen, and OSCE actually also is used as a platform. It is observing in Minsk these talks. what can you say about this process? Would it help actually to resolve, to help the peaceful process as well? And why is it stalled, if you can assess?
The issue of prisoner exchange is being discussed in the humanitarian working group within the framework of the trilateral contact group. Our role, the role of the Special Monitoring Mission, would be to monitor a possible exchange when it does take place. Any observation that we would make during such a monitoring activity would be made public.
Thank you. Do you have more questions? One more question in Ukrainian.
Good afternoon, Igor Yashkin, Intertas representation in Ukraine. Mr. Hook, the following question, whether the mission is ready to be a mediator between the Ukrainian side and ORDLO starting from tonight when another ceasefire arrangement was agreed, and in overall whether the OSCE is ready to mediate considering the withdrawal of the Russian officers from the JCCC.
Thank you for your question. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission takes its task from its mandate given to it by 57 participating states. Among those tasks is that of facilitating dialogue on the ground, and we will continue to be offering platform for dialogue with all involved as we have done in the past 3.5 years. We expect that everyone who participates in this dialogue does so in good faith. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the sides to cease fire, to withdraw weapons, to disengage forces and hardware, and to demine. Thank you.
If we have no more questions, thank you, and we will end.